I'm a man of faith. I ask God a ton of times, why now? Why in this moment? Whenever I'm having the best season of my college career, would you allow me to go through this?
Welcome everybody to the highs and lows of X's and O's. I'm your host, Dr. Hillary Cauthen, or as some of my clients like to call me, Dr. C. I'm a clinical sports psychologist based in Austin, Texas, and I've been in the field for over 17 years working with individual athletes, teams, and organizations in building their mental performance and wellness programs. My passion is to assist breaking down stigmas across communities, which is highlighted in my book, Hello Trauma, Our Invisible Teammate. This is your go-to podcast where we delve into the intricate dance between mental health, performance, and success. Every week, we explore the peaks and valleys while striving for success with the insight straight from top performers and elite athletes. Join us as we uncover their stories, challenges, and mental cheat code that could be a game changer for your performance playbook. Let's get started.
They set up a screen to the near side of Whittaker. Fozzy Whittaker went rogue. Touchdown, Carolina.
This week's guest, I'm really excited to have on Mr. Fozzy Whittaker, our former NFL running back and kick returner for 6 seasons, during which time he played in the Super Bowl 50 with Carolina Panthers. He also played partial seasons with the Cleveland Browns and the San Diego Chargers and was on the Arizona Cardinals practice squad for a season. He played collegiate football for the Texas Longhorns, where he was a 2011 first team all Big 12 selection in the special teams as a kick returner, and was named an honorable mention for the 2011 All Big 12 Special Teams Player of the Year. And my fun fact about our guest, Fozzy not only had a decorated football career, but he was a 2-sport collegiate athlete for the University of Texas, where he was a member of their track and field team and participated in the 2010 Big 12 Track and Field Championship. So welcome. I'm excited you're here.
Thank you for having me. I freaking feel like I'm super special with that layout that you had. So I'm appreciative of that. Thank you for having me on as well.
Yeah. Well, why don't you start telling us just currently what you're working on?
Yeah. So currently I'm all over the place, really. Mm-hmm. I own a gym, franchise partner, my wife and I, Burn Boot Camp, Cedar Park. Nice. We've been the gym owners there for 2 years now. Going on 2.5 at the moment. It's been really awesome, eye-opening from an entrepreneurial standpoint. It's definitely given me tools to be able to focus on how I look at, building a successful venture and then going out and seeing people react to something that we built a community from the ground up, everything from the ground up. Like there was no building there. Constructed it, everything, and then seeing the community grow. It's been truly amazing. Not only that, I just actually got verification today from ESPN that they will be hiring me on for another year.
Amazing.
So I will be calling more games this upcoming fall and doing some studio work for ESPN across the country for college football. So
exciting.
I'm doing that. And then I also currently am on Sirius XM radio as well. So I do that weekly. Right now we're in preparation for media days whenever that comes around. Texas part of the SEC now. So I'll be in Dallas mid-July for the SEC media days.
Well, I like to start with what we call learn and play.
Okay.
So bring me back to your first sport experience integrated into how you got into athletics.
Okay. So I got 2 older brothers.
All right.
So my middle brother, Curtis, and then my oldest brother, Gerald. They played football before I was born. They played football all the way up through high school. And me being the youngest of the 3 boys that my mom had, I wanted to idolize my brother, right? I wanted to be everything that they were. I wanted to do everything that they did. It's been a couple of times where we used to live in an apartment complex in the southwest side of Houston called Meyerland. And where we lived in that apartment complex, across the street, there was an AMC 24. There was a movie theater.
Yeah.
And my older brothers were old enough to be able to walk over and watch a movie, but I was still too young. And I remember one time vividly being mad, yelling at my mom, saying, I want to go with my brothers. I want to go with my brothers. And they got to go to the movies. I had to sit back because I was only like 3 years old and just mad, throwing a temper tantrum. But that was the beginning of me kind of doing everything that they did and trying to basically hang with the boys, right? I wanted to be one of the boys. So my middle brother's 4 years older than me. My oldest is 7 years older than me. But but they started playing flag football for the MLK Oilers in Houston. That's where I got my start in football, was at the MLK Oilers playing flag football. And man, that was a journey that I'll never forget, just seeing my brothers play. Another funny thing is while I was playing flag, since they're so much older than me, they were playing tackle.
Right.
I didn't really understand the difference. So I thought football was football. So I'm out there tackling people in flag. They throwing penalties on me. I was like, I'm playing football. What do you want me to do? And I eventually had to learn, like, you can't tackle, you can't block. You just got to, just run and continue to pull the flag. So it took a little learning curve for me, just because I wanted to do everything that my brothers did, but they were the ones that ignited the spark in me to have that athletic background, and more so in particular football, because it was their favorite sport to watch, and eventually became my favorite sport as well.
Yeah. And now we obviously know you did track, but take me through, were you any other sports that you ventured in that you played around with?
I did. I played basketball for 2 seasons in middle school. That was not the brightest day of my, I guess, athletic career. I'm not a hooper.
All right.
If you know anything about me. Now, I love wearing Jordans, and I wear LeBrons, and I wear Kobe's, and I love sneakers, but that is not my calling. Let me say that. But yeah, football was definitely my first love. I actually got recruited to a track team from football. It was a team that I played against called the South Belt Dolphins. They had a kid that ran on a track team called Wings. And the coach for Wings came to one of the games to watch his kid that was playing. He eventually saw me and approached my mom, was like, "Hey, have you all ever ran summer track before?" I was like, if you're interested, I got the perfect opportunity. And my mom was like, "Do you want to run track?" And I was like, "I guess so. People say I'm fast. Well, let's see how fast I really am." And that turned out to be a beauty and a joy as well, because that became my second love. Yeah. Football and track, they go hand in hand for me.
Sure.
I'll tell you something different, though, that you probably didn't expect. I was in the band.
I was in the band. So what was your instrument?
Yes, I was a tuba player.
Oh, I was the trumpet.
Nice.
Yeah, so brass all the way.
There we go.
And then I think that's the thing, though. Athletics, band, right? Like, it's a dichotomy, but when you get it, you get it.
Absolutely. And I love music, too. I still love music. It helps me harmonize with things that are going on right now. It kind of is its own language, and it speaks to me, and it helps me get through certain times. It puts me in a mood, puts me in an environment. I try to always hear kind of some of the background beats that
Sure.
go on in a song, and analyzing that. So it's a whole thing that I truly enjoy, but it definitely, sports, athletics, band, kept me busy, and it allowed me to learn values in each sport, and each extracurricular activity that I did taught me something different that I still carry with me today.
Looking back during that developmental period, like, what year maybe stands out the most where a coach, a teammate, like, had the most influence on you?
Ironically, it was early in my elementary days. So I talked about whenever we first started playing flag football, we played for the MLK Oilers. It was whenever I lived on the south side of Houston before we moved. We ended up moving to Pearland, which is where I spent my elementary school days and all the way up through high school. Played for a little league team called the Pearland Patriots. My very first coach, actually, God rest his soul, he ended up passing away just a couple of weeks ago from cancer, but his name was Robin Henry. And he was one of the most influential coaches I've ever had. And I still remember him. Obviously, that was whenever I was 7, 8, 9, 10 years old. But he just had a passion for the game that stood out, that made me who I was, made me love the game for what it was. He put me in positions to be successful even at that age. I was one of the faster kids whenever the game day rolled around. So a lot of times they would say, "Hey, toss it and then just go run outside, Fozzy, just run, right?" And that was one of the things that I started learning from Coach Robin. It wasn't just, use your speed to get outside and outrun everybody, right? Sometimes you want to come up against somebody that may be just as fast or maybe bigger and faster than you. What are you going to do then? And so he taught me some of the key lessons of, setting up your opponent, right? Run outside and then stick your foot up, be able to cut up field. But it was a moment that I'll cherish forever because I made life lasting long-term friendships. A lot of the guys that I played with on that Patriots team, I still talk to today. A couple of them contacted me and told me about the services for Coach Robin, which, it made my heart really jump for joy just knowing that, like, I didn't know at 7 years old I was going to have this friend whenever I became 34, 35 years of age, right? Never know 30 years later, like, I'd still be talking to some of these people, talking about the impact that the coach had on us. And so that was my first initial impression of a coach being able to leave something, a legacy within me that I've now taken with me and continue to expand and hopefully sharing that with other kids as I go along my journey of, just helping others. And ultimately, I'm a servant. I grew up in the church. If Jesus can do it, then I feel like him being able to showcase what it looks like to be a servant, I shouldn't be above anything. So I want to be a servant as well. And Coach Robin was one of those people that helped me along the path of showing what servanthood looks like.
No, I mean, it's really odd to still have that dynamic and connection for 30 years, right? And the impact, right?
Yes.
Like the experience you've had, right? We hear a lot of difficult stories of youth coaches and more negative experiences, right?
Mm-hmm.
And to hear such a positive impact that really shaped you as a man into kind of how you bring and serve others now is really awesome. So when was there a moment, whether it was middle school or high school, where you were like, football, like, I'm going to school for that. Like, that's going to be my future?
It probably was 8th grade. And this was the time that the University of Miami was freaking on fire. Like, they could do no wrong. They had all the top players. They ended up winning the national championship against Nebraska that same year. I had an Andre Johnson college jersey, number 5, Miami. It was the school I wanted to go to. And it was funny because my middle brother, Curtis, was a huge Florida State fan. And Deion Sanders was the reason why he loved Florida State. Right. And every single year, neither one of us have no ties to Florida. We don't even have family in Florida. Right? I don't even know how it came about. But every single year, whenever Florida State and Miami played against each other, it was like a rivalry between siblings, with he and I going for Miami, myself, and then him going for Florida State. But it was something about what Larry Coker, who was the head coach of that team, it was something about the way and the swagger that they took the field, were able to literally dominate every team that they faced, put together a collaboration of guys who gelled together and turned into family. It was truly amazing to witness that time whenever Miami was on top of everything. And that was in my 8th grade year. And I just had a love for playing the game. And at that time, I started seeing the development in myself of being able to showcase the talents that God had given me and put them on display. And, just being productive whenever my number was called. It was like, if I ever get a chance, I want to play at the next level. I want to play Division I football. I want to play for Larry Coker and the University of Miami. I want to be on TV. I want to be, what I was watching Andre Johnson do. I want to be what Sean Taylor and Ed Reed were. I want to be that for another kid. And so that was really my kind of first introduction and getting my feet wet and really understanding what it meant to start taking football seriously, right? It was a game. It was for fun, but now there are added benefits to it. There are bonuses. Right. I can get my college paid for. I can set my family, or I can get things in return. And so that made it a little bit more intriguing whenever I understood what it meant to be able to go play collegiate football.
And the recruiting process, like, you didn't go to Miami. So how did we end up, at the University of Texas?
Yeah, well, Larry Coker got fired a couple years later. So that didn't work out. It was funny because in 2003, going into my freshman year, or right after my freshman year in high school, I was finishing up my summer track season, and we had the National Junior Olympics take place in Miami. And I tried to go up there for like an official visit, all the stuff. I was like, I need to know, is this where I really want to be? Is this what's happening? But ultimately, once Larry Coker got fired, I realized that maybe playing out of state, as far away from Texas, is not the best idea. And maybe it wouldn't be the best environment for me to thrive as a young man and an individual looking to find his place in society and on a football team. And as I started playing, my sophomore year was my first year on varsity. I never thought about college, honestly, from a standpoint of like, I'm doing this so I can get recruited by this particular team. It was more so the thought process that I had was I play the game, I play it 100% to the best of my abilities to help my team win. And ultimately, I wanted to bring a state championship to Pearland High School. I wasn't able to accomplish that, but that was my goal, was to be able to go out there every single Friday night that we played and lay it out on the line, whether that's blocking, whether that's being a special teams returner as a sophomore, whether that's starting as the starting running back in my fourth game of my sophomore year, whether it's catching out of the backfield, running some receiver out of the slot position. There were a lot of different things that I wanted to just sacrifice in order to make sure that my team at the end of the day came home victorious. And that was my only goal. And ultimately, through that recruiting process, I go into my junior year, continue to have success, thankfully, to the coaches that I had. It was a wonderful coaching staff that I still talk to this day. Had those coaches in my corner, had my teammates and my players in my corner, grew up with all these guys since we all were in the Pearland area and played against each other all the way from the Pearland Patriot days, or played with them all the way through to high school. And man, the trust that we had and shared with each other, the off-season trainings that we shared with each other, right? I wanted to be able to give to them as much as they had given to me. And after my junior year is whenever the recruitment letters started to come in. And I was just appreciative and thankful because I didn't know what level of caliber I really was.
Sure.
It was one of those things where Rivals was around, but it was very fresh and early. And the internet access isn't what it is today.
Right.
You can't just pull out a cell phone and be like, oh, okay, this guy's 5-star, this guy's 4-star, this guy's 3-star, right? And it was something that I didn't even concern myself with. I didn't care what other people thought of me. I just wanted to win, right? Whatever they said, that's fine. They got jobs they got to do. I got a job I got to do, and my job is to help my team win on Friday night. And so ultimately, that was just my main goal, my main focus. I got my first scholarship offer from Oklahoma State. Got my second scholarship offer over the phone from LSU, Louisiana State University. And then I went to a junior day with the University of Texas, and Mac Brown calls me into his room with Sally Brown and me, my mom, and my buddy of mine, which was one of my high school teammates. He came with me as well. And he sat down in his office and let me know what he thought of me and said, hey, I want to offer you to come to the University of Texas. That was my first in-person offer from a D1 coach. And I was like, I feel like this is the place I need to be. And it was truly amazing to be a part of that and witness that. And then Texas goes on to win a national championship that same year. So I thought it was fitting and the right choice. And I saw people do the things that I did in high school. I saw them implement some of the plays that I ran while I was in high school. So I thought it would be a direct fit for me to be able to stay a little bit closer to home. It's only 2.5 hours from my mom and my family. They can come out, they can see me, and it's not as big of a travel. But ultimately, it allowed me to really showcase what I could do on a huge scale. The brand of Texas is almost unmatched at the collegiate level, and it really has a huge impact. But it wasn't just the athletic side that, brought me to Texas. Ultimately, my mom always told me I'm a student athlete. Student comes first. If I don't got the grades, I'm not going to be on the field.
Right.
And so academics was truly a huge selling point for where I wanted to go. Columbia was on my recruiting list. There were other schools that Duke was on my recruiting list, like other high-tier academic schools that showed interest in me as well. But ultimately, I thought Texas was one of the best case scenarios where the academics and the athletics pair with each other.
Right.
And it truly came to fruition for me, being able to live a lifelong dream, knowing that, hey, the previous running backs that came through Texas got to play at the next level. The previous running backs left their mark at the University of Texas. Previous running backs all played at the next level and had a truly amazing impact in college and then for the teams that they went on to play with. So I wanted to be able to be in the line and the lineage of history. And I was just thankful that God saw favor on me to put me in that position and allow me to play at University of Texas and then ultimately play in the NFL.
Yes, let's shift to what I call our high pressure play. So this talks about your transition journey through Texas, and then we'll get to that professional shift, right? So coming in, you weren't really paying attention to what star you were, what level guy. Like we all kind of know, though, every guy coming in that recruiting class, they're all the number ones in their area,
Right.
you know? So talk to me through this transition. You're coming into a university that is consistently known and still known for really great running backs. That's part of their game. You know, like where were you at in this lineup? What was the transition coming in? Like, how was that adjustment?
Yeah, it was tough because like you mentioned, whenever I'm in high school, I was the guy, right? A lot of times a play needed to be made. The coach will call up a play that involved me in some form or fashion. And that's awesome in and of itself, right? To feel like your coach wants you to be able to be that guy. But you come to a place like the University of Texas and everybody is that guy. And some of the guys ahead of you have been that guy for a couple of years. And so the way that Jamal Charles, whenever I was getting recruited by Texas, which is that 2005 national championship team, that was Jamal's freshman year. Whenever I saw them utilize him in that fashion and in that magnitude, I saw myself. I saw shades of myself. We both come from, you know, the Houston area, Jamal in Port Arthur, myself in Pearland. It was like, okay, they take a guy that's coming from around the same area as myself. They plugged him in. He's having an instant impact. He has success. Okay, I could see myself doing some of those things, but it wasn't until I got enrolled at the University of Texas and understood, oh, this is the training that Jamal Charles does. This is the preparation that Jamal Charles does. This is how the coaches see him and trust in him to do the right things to allow him to be able to get on the field. And I was like, oh, okay, I see. I got to take my game to another level.
And hearing you talk about it, right, obviously there is that selflessness that it's always been a part of you and the humility that's been there and the patience. And as I've been listening to a lot of these stories and as our listeners have, that seems to be a running theme of having to be humble. Those that are great, that have the highs, there's a sense of humility and trust in the craft, but in the team and in the process. But it's not easy. Like you guys are competitors. Like we have to be a little bit real here. Like high achieving competitors want to compete.
Yes.
So how are you navigating the space when you're not the guy? Like how do you get through it?
Ultimately, I'm showing the coaches why I can be the guy. So whether it's in practice, whether it's in off-season workouts, whenever we do what we call a county fair, and you're doing mat drills, bear crawls, and cone drills, squat jumps until you blue in the face, or whether it was in the classroom going over film, breaking down plays, coach asked a question, giving us tests to be able to see how much information we can retain. I wanted to show that I can be the best at all of those things, right? Until you recognize that I can provide value on the field, I'm going to continue to do that. And once you do recognize that I do provide that value, then I'm going to give you a little bit more. I'm going to let you know there's reason why you put your faith and trust in me, and I want to be able to reward you in that same fashion. So every single day, it's the same mantra whenever you look into the Bible and it says iron sharpens iron. That's the mentality that I approach all of my fellow running backs with, the guys that even came in after me, even in other positions. I wanted to challenge them to be the best versions of themselves, because at the end of the day, if they're improving, it's going to help me improve, because ultimately I want to beat them with that ultra competitive spirit. But if they improve and I improve, then ultimately the entire team is starting to improve, because they just get elevation just from us two already. Sure. And then if that becomes infectious and contagious amongst the other team, now you got DBs staying after working a little bit later. Now you got linebackers doing some extra with the running backs. Now you got wide receivers catching late with their hands. Now you got quarterbacks staying, getting their timing down. Now you got offensive linemen staying with the running backs, talking about how we're going to pick up blocks and protection and how we're going to block this on power and on counter. Now you're looking at a team that's truly brought in with each other, which brings them closer. But then at the same time, we're all rowing in the same boat. Nobody's necessarily looking to be selfish, like, oh, if I'm not playing or if I'm not the guy, like, I'm not finna do no extra work. I'm not finna do this. No, that wasn't the mentality that we had, and that's what made us who we were whenever we went and won a Big 12, whenever we went and won a Fiesta Bowl and played for a national championship. And so that's where my mindset has always been about the team, number one, but then also competing at the high level, that whenever my time does come, I can shine and take advantage of it. And my goal was to never give it back. Right.
Yeah. And so, you come into a winning culture.
Mm-hmm.
They just won, they're riding high. You were a part of a winning culture.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that shapes it easier to allow everyone to get on board and row the same way, or?
Absolutely. But there's hesitancy whenever I say that, because it can make you complacent in certain areas as well. Mac Brown won 8 seasons consecutively with 10 wins, 10 or more wins. Let me say that, because we had multiple seasons where more wins were given. But you go 8 straight seasons of winning 10 or more games, you start smelling yourself a little bit. You start feeling yourself. It's like, hey, we can show up and do this, right? We've already shown we can do it 8 years straight. Like, we can show up and do this. And that was one of the most humbling experiences that I felt, was after that 2009 season, we played against Alabama in that 2010 national championship year. We went 5-7 the following season. And it wasn't necessarily because we weren't trying hard. It wasn't necessarily that we just expected to win. Winning's hard.
Right.
We were taught a very hard lesson that year. And it made it very difficult for us to understand how to fix the problem, because we hadn't been in that situation. Like you mentioned, most of us came from winning programs. Most of us have experienced wins all of our lives, like whether that was in Little League, middle school, high school. A lot of us had been on successful programs. So whenever we were losing and had that losing season, it really made us reflect on why we were doing what we were doing. And I thought that was the most pivotal moment in my career from a football perspective, especially at the collegiate level, on what needed to happen in order to get back on track and start getting the team and the environment moving in the right direction. And that made it where we were able to galvanize much more in the offseason. Now, we didn't necessarily win 10 games that following year. We won 8 games, but it was much more than that 5-7 year. And it was similar to actually Coach Sark right now.
Right.
They went 5-7, then they went 8-5, and then go on and play in a CFP. And so it laid the foundation for what to expect, how to fight through it. The offseason was miserable because everybody was embarrassed, right? You only win 5 games at a program like the University of Texas with the resources and athletes that we have. And ultimately that humbled us and made us more hungry. And so I look at winning as it can be a gift and a curse if you know how to handle it. And I can say in that 2010 season, we didn't know how to handle it as well as we probably should have. But ultimately that had shaped the future for where the program hopefully was looking to get back towards, as we saw the amount of success that we were able to have whenever the program is hitting on all cylinders.
It's interesting, right? Because we prepare athletes on how to win. That's the common outcome. That's the goal. That's why I always say don't ever set a goal that's like to win a game. Like no one shows up wanting to lose, right? You show up to win. That's the rules of the game. So, but we're preparing constantly to win. We don't prepare on how to handle a loss.
Right.
We say the phrase like fail forward. It's okay to fail, but people fear failure. They fear evaluation, and we're not preparing anyone on how to handle losing.
Yeah. It's funny because I heard a coach mention this on a podcast I was listening to. And you got the win column, the W's, and you have the L columns. And usually it stands for losses. But the coach said, you only lose whenever you're not learning from that loss. And he mentioned that L does not stand for loss. It stands for lessons learned. And whenever you can apply the lessons that you learn from that loss, you eventually end up back in that win column. And ultimately, I started analyzing, computing that, and I'm teaching that to my son now because I didn't have that.
Right.
Nobody told me L's actually could help you. Like L was a failure in my mind. I mean, we just prepared all this time and it kind of didn't matter.
Right.
We just went out there and squandered the opportunity that was given to us. So being able to shift even my mindset, even today, I'm not necessarily competing at the level that I was, but I play pickleball.
Well, let's be real. Pickleball is a real,
Pickleball is legit.
that is a high,
legit.
It's grown real fast in Austin.
Very fast, very fast. And I play it a lot. I play it every week. And my goal, same way.
Yeah.
I'm trying to win, right? But even if I do take an L, what did I learn in that game that allows me to become a better pickleball player, to be a better football player, to be a better father, to be a better husband, to be a better business person, right? And I can take all of these things throughout the course of my life that allow me to continue to advance where I'm trying to get to, and then bring somebody else with me. I told you, Coach Robin, that's what he was known for. Bring somebody else with you. And so ultimately, that's where the L comes from, right? How you handle that is the way that you follow up from it, right? Are you taking lessons learned, or are you using it as defeat and then just going to hide away and not figure or do something about it? And ultimately, my reflections have turned into the earlier, where I'm going to learn a lesson from it. I'm going to apply it. And then I'm going to be better the next time that I go out there on the field.
Well, let's spend some time on these L's, right? These lessons learned, because it's about the highs and lows.
Absolutely.
So we know that there was a low in the losing season, we call it, right? 5-8, you said?
5-7.
5-7. We got to get it correct. 5-7, right?
It's terrible either way.
Either way, it was not great.
Right.
But that was probably not the only difficult thing that you had to work through, right? So talk to me about maybe the most pivotal, resilient journey you had to have through your time at Texas.
Yeah, for me, it was my senior year. So our 8-win season, the year after the 5-7 season. Going into my senior year, it's like, hey, this is my time. It's my moment. It's the opportunity to
draft year
to take advantage of all the opportunities. I get to be the player, right? I'm the man. I'm the guy that the coaches have the faith and the trust in. They're believing in me. Ultimately, my season, my senior year, it was cut short from me. We go on the road to play against Missouri in November of 2011. I'm running a toss play, stick my foot in the ground in the turf there, and my knee gives out, buckles, boom, season's done.
You know.
College career over with. I had no idea what I did to my knee, but I knew I was done for the year. It was the most excruciating pain I had ever felt in my life. I never want to experience it again.
Right.
And even to this day, it affects me just to the capacity of where my knee health was, where I was at in the trajectory of my college season. It was the best season that I had in college. I was utilized a lot more. I had multiple receiving touchdowns, had multiple rushing touchdowns, had multiple kickoff return touchdowns. And so it was just the best season for me in that moment. And man, boom, it happened. And it was a lot that I had to go through and face in that moment, because I'm a man of faith. Mm-hmm. And I asked God a ton of times, why now? Why in this moment? Whenever I'm having the best season of my college career, would you allow this to go? Would you allow me to go through this? And ultimately, it was one of the few times that I questioned what path or what journey I was supposed to take. And as I began to heal and reflect, and I hear my family, still have my back, was like, hey, I understand it's not a good time for you from the standpoint of not being able to finish your college career, but you left an impact, not just on the team, but on people around. And it takes me back to that earlier version. Whenever I was in 8th grade, I talked about how Andre Johnson, I wore his jersey. I talked about how Ken Dorsey was that quarterback, and that 2001 Miami team, they left an impact in me. And it was the same thing I wanted to reciprocate to others. And my mom had to bring me back to that version, was like, hey, you left a positive impact. I just got a message on Instagram last week from a lady. We used to do Dale Children's Hospital visits on Fridays before the game, whenever we either flew out or went to the hotel. And she just told me that one of the girls that I visited with that was super young in that time is actually graduating from the University of Texas. And it was that moment made it all worth it. It was like I didn't care the trials and tribulations that I went through. I did go through some major pain. I did go through therapy that took, over a year for me to overcome. I did lose out on my draft status. I did lose out on playing, my last home game at the University of Texas in DKR Stadium. Like I missed out on those, but what I gained from the impact that I was able to see, Coach Snyder, who was the head coach for the Kansas State Wildcats, hand wrote me a letter and told me, he was sorry for what I had to go through, but that I left a tremendous impact just on him.
In that season.
After
you're like rehab recovering, you got a letter from a different
coach.
That's amazing.
And he was the head coach.
Right.
He's supposed to be prepping for a
He's
game.
your opponent. He's write you a letter. Wow.
He hand wrote me a letter and had it delivered to Coach Brown. Coach Brown ended up handing it to me, and I was floored. I've never seen that happen before. The co-op right on Guadalupe, they made a giant poster, but bigger than longer than this room, and they had people sign it
for you. And
then they gave it to me, gifted it. I had no idea, and that was it. I still have it at the house. It was awesome to see the response that people had, and it showed the love that people had. And it wasn't because of me scoring touchdowns. It wasn't necessarily because, I was helping Texas win or that I was on TV. It was just because of the impact that I had left on them. Me being me, I was just trying to be a servant, and ultimately seeing that gratitude expressed back to me made me very emotional and understand why I do and why I did what I do and what I did. And so it was amazing. But that was the hardest and toughest time of my collegiate career, which was softened by the blow and the support that everybody was able to gather around me and help uplift me and still continue my fight and journey to play in the National Football League.
Yeah, because when you're touching on that, most people don't realize or own it. You feel very isolated. You feel very alone when you're injured.
Oh, yes.
You go through a grieving process, right? It is, you were angry, you were sad, you were in denial, you're questioning all of who you were. And most of it is in your head alone, because when you step back, you have amazing support of your community, your family, your team, but you're angry. Like, you had a vision and we can't deny the dichotomy that goes on, right? And
yes.
And this was a real process. How did you navigate and still say, I'm putting my name in for the draft? I know I have no idea what my chances are right now from what you were going to be. What was that decision like for you?
Well, it started with my mom. My mom always said, if you do something, you go do it 100%. And I went to the University of Texas, number one, to get my degree, which I was able to get my first degree in 3.5 years. And then I needed to finish my second one. I needed one more semester to finish up my master's degree. I got hurt. If I did not get hurt that spring semester, I would have went off to training in Florida or Ohio, depending on which one I chose.
Sure.
And I would have trained for the combine, got ready, tested, did all that stuff. I don't know when I would have actually completed my master's program.
Right.
But because I got hurt, it allowed me to stay home. I was able to rehab at the University of Texas, which has everything I could ask for from a resource standpoint. And it opened up a doorway for me to actually excel. I ended up getting my master's degree. I ended up, getting ahead of schedule from a standpoint of where my knee was and just showcasing how hard and furious I was going to be attacking the workout. But it was tough.
Right.
It was very tough. I didn't have a ton of interest from scouts. I didn't have a ton of interest from other teams. I went to the combine. They said, hey, your knee is still recovering. You probably won't be able to play this year. So a lot of teams looked at me and was like, we can't really use him this year. So why spend money on him whenever he's not going to be of use to us in this moment? So there were a lot of people and a lot of teams that backed off in that moment because there was no immediate value for them to be able to sign me. And so ultimately, I ended up healing up. I did not get drafted. I went undrafted, had to spend another few months training, still doing that same regimen, had to pick up a part-time job because I got to pay the bills too, right?
Right, you graduated.
It wasn't no NIL around at that time.
Right.
So I wasn't just giving money. And ultimately, I just prayed on it and continued to work, and an opportunity presented itself. My agent called me and said, hey, Arizona Cardinals want to fly you out for a workout to see where you're progressing and how you look. Go and press. So I go out there, do the workout. Didn't know how I did. They didn't tell me anything. They flew me back home that same day. I was like, well, I guess I did all right. I don't know. They didn't say nothing. They was just like, okay, thanks for coming. That was it. Right. And then a week later, they called me and said, hey, we want to sign you to the press while you're flying out. About 5 hours.
Wow.
Then boom, there I go. I got my first opportunity to play for the Arizona Cardinals on practice squad. That was the gateway in order to playing active 6 years in the NFL. So a long journey, but ultimately it was just the consistency that I had and the faith and the belief and the support system that you talked about that allowed me to continue to put my head down, keep working for what I really wanted.
And, I think it's your mom's mantra and the motto of like, you don't finish you start what you finish, right?
Absolutely.
And that was a process of like, you had a vision, you had a plan, whether it was academics, it was athletics, like you better go all the way the long haul until it's done.
Absolutely. And that's, I live by that today, right? If I start something, I better make sure I finish it properly. And she always said, right, if you're going to do something, do it right. And don't do it 50%, don't halfway do it, because now you got to go back and do it 100%. So don't do it twice, just do it right. And so I take that to everything I do, and I got to tell my son that every single day. Ooh. But now I get to reflect back as a parent,
right,
and understand why my mom was saying it so many times and why she instilled it the way that she did. And me trying to instill it into my kids, I was like, oh, my mama had a lot more patience than me. and that's truly amazing in itself, because now I got a different perspective. But hopefully it allows me to be able to tell Frost, my son, or Nova, my daughter, to say, hey, these are going to be life lessons that hopefully you can take with you if you want them, right? I'm not going to force you, but if you want them, it's something that can provide value for you down the line. And hopefully, time will tell, but if they listen, it can be some value with what my mom instilled in me that have shown to make me successful, and maybe they can take some things and put their own little spin on it to make them successful.
And I think hearing the struggles at the highest point of your career into the lowest part, right? We talked about the physical rehab, the emotional support, it leads me into kind of the mental play. What was your relationship at the time with mental health and mental performance through college and then in professional career?
I had none. Zero. And this how ignorant I was to it. I used to think if you had to go see a doctor or a therapist, or if you needed to speak to a counselor, I used to think that was because you were experiencing mental issues. I didn't really understand the impact and the benefits that it has. I'm in counseling now.
Right.
I do counseling. I'm in marriage counseling with my wife. I do individual counseling now with a guy, Dr. Moore, and he and I talk, and it's been truly amazing, eye-opening, and I wish I would have done it earlier, because I didn't really know it. I had this ignorant mindset that, it's only if you have, maybe a clinical diagnosis,
right,
or whatever the case may be. And so seeing how it impacts so many people, and I probably only made it through my lows within my career because of the faith that I had. Otherwise, there would have been a lot of turmoil that I probably could have ended up. I could have probably sought refuge in alcohol,
right,
drugs, or going to go party, or whatever the case may be, right? I would have found some sort of outing or some sort of relief somewhere else, but ultimately being able to stay focused allowed me to stay close in my relationship with God, and then ultimately keep me headed in the direction that I felt like was where He wanted me to be. And so I didn't have a relationship, though, as far as speaking with someone about the impacts that I went through, or some of the trauma that I went through. My dad passed away whenever I was 3, and my mom raised all 3 of my brothers and myself, all 3 of us, almost basically by ourselves.
Right.
I didn't realize the trauma that she had to go through raising 3 boys without a man of the house. Like, it was a lot that I had to unpack even in my own personal therapy sessions, and ultimately something that probably would have benefited me a lot earlier if I would have been able to know what it was for, know what it was meant for, know how to utilize it, and then experience those benefits at a much earlier age. Maybe it would have helped me earlier in my career or in my life. And so I didn't have a relationship, but now I do. So
yeah. So take me to what shifted, right? Because you're right. At that time when you're going through, especially the college time, it wasn't readily available. Even the professional domains, it wasn't part of the CBA where there was at least someone contracted, right? Those things have all shifted. But what allowed you to be open up as you've progressed into your adult?
Well, for me, it's a mindset. It probably ignorant statement is, well, it can't hurt me. That's how I used to feel.
That's actually very positive. Like, well, I could try it.
Right. I mean, I would try almost anything once, right? As long as it doesn't kill me, or at least I hope it doesn't kill me, right? If it doesn't hurt me, then I'll at least try and see what happens, and then just go from there is how I look at it. But I need to assess things for my own personal lens. I got to understand it from my perspective to start really making an inference on, okay, is it worth it for me to explore this? Is it not? How much benefit does it actually provide? And it was, I want to say, maybe my last year in the NFL, whenever they had the clinician be able to come on, and they had the CBA change, and the therapists were able to come through and be on alert literally every single day and readily available within the facility. And that was something that was different. None of us had experienced that. None of us had ever seen it. None of us had ever had the access that close to us to be able to use it as well. And so I spoke with her almost every single day. I saw her at lunchtime, right? Everybody kind of has lunch at the same time frame. See her in passing, just having conversation and see what it was like. Okay, do I need to do this? Okay, set up an appointment here. Let's go over some of these things. That was just the beginning and the entryway. And it was like, okay, this is what it's for. It's like, for me, I'm a huge movie buff. I love movies. Like, I love watching movies. I love going to the movies. I love movies. Critics will tell you everything about a movie. And I can go on Rotten Tomatoes and say it has a 5% rating, and every critic said the movie sucked. But I ultimately got to go to the movie and see it for myself to make sure that my evaluation is mine and mine alone, and not necessarily based off of what somebody else says. And that was my same experience with speaking with a therapist or a clinician about, how can this help me? How can this benefit? Well, let me experience it for myself, and then I can make that evaluation after I've actually done my due diligence in that process.
I mean, I think you speak to a really pivotal moment. One, it was lack of resources, lack of availability, lack of awareness or knowledge of what could this do for me? I think we're trained to think it's only if there's a problem, right? We go see a doctor if there's an illness versus the prevention side of things, or the resource like an athletic trainer where there's prehabbing and then rehabbing, right? Like the mental game can be that as well, but we didn't know. But at least you had the curiosity because someone was there to say, hey, let me explore this myself. Let me ask the questions. Let me figure it out. Looking back, because we see it shifting now, where do you think have been most beneficial in your career to have access to a sports psychologist, a mental performance coach, youth, high school, collegiate, professional?
It's definitely, for me, collegiate. Definitely. That was the hardest transition that I went through. Number one, there are so many different things and factors that are happening during that time frame, right? You're still learning how to be a young adult whenever you leave from high school and go to college. And for a lot of us that made up the University of Texas football roster, we left home. And it was our first time away from our parents. And being a distance away where they can't just pull up on you in 20 or 30 minutes. Like, they got to plan to travel 3-4 hours or fly for some of the people that lived on the East Coast or West Coast. And so understanding time management, understanding going to class, study hall, practice, getting rest, and still being social, all in your first few semesters as a freshman, it takes some getting used to. and you don't have a ton of people that understand what you're going through, except the people that either have went through it previously or the people going through it right now with you, your other cohort or fellow teammates in that same position that you're in. But if there was a resource that allowed you to talk through some of the issues that you had, hey, I'm not doing so hot in this math test. It's getting tricky because I got practice at this time, but the office hours at this time, but my mind really is in somewhere else. If I had a sounding board to be able to relate to, because you don't want to talk to your mom all the time. You don't want to talk to your dad all the time, right? There's certain things you want to talk about with them, certain things you don't want to talk about with them, certain things you're going to talk about with your brothers in the locker room, certain things you're going to keep to yourself. But if you have somebody that sees it objectively, but then also can give you insight on why you're feeling the way that you are, and that's really been huge for me. It's like, okay, where's that feeling actually coming from? Where is it stemming from? How am I feeling this way? And then ways I can handle those emotions and feelings that I have. That's where it can really provide value and impact for somebody that's trying to become a young man, 17, 18, 19 years old, being away from home for the first time. So I thought in my evaluation, or at least in my experiences, college is definitely the area, especially if you go to a big university, right? 50,000 kids on campus like there are at the University of Texas, and then no other professional sports, all eyes on you. So much pressure to be successful, so much pressure to succeed in your role on the field and off the field, that they could utilize those resources in a major way.
So if we shift to the current play now, landscape shifting in college space with NIL, it is more of the job, it is more money, there is more enabling outside things that get in the way. Professional the same way, right? Resources are shifting. Do you feel that the access is readily available and that players will take advantage of the mental health support?
I think access is readily available. Do I think players will take advantage? Probably not. And it's not a slight at any of the young athletes right now. I just don't know if that's something that they're seeking in and of themselves at this moment. It takes, in my mind, a level of maturation to understand, hey, I need a little bit of assistance here. I don't have to necessarily be too proud to say that I need assistance here. Whereas whenever I was younger, and I'm more so speaking on my personal experiences and not generalizing the athlete in and of itself. Whenever I was younger, it was like, oh, I'll find a way to fix it. I'll find a way to handle it. I can get it done. I got time, or I got this. I can handle it, blah, blah, blah. Right? Whatever the case may be, you make it up excuse, or you pump your head up with this bravado that somehow you can carry and do it all. And ultimately, they don't have to work or fight against each other.
Right.
They should be working together in order to enhance your experience as you're going through this process that is foreign to you, because you've never done it before, or you've never been in this position before. You never had this many eyes on you at one time. You've never been a part of social media in the way that it is, where everybody got a cell phone and access to video you and track you and see everything that you're doing, right? And I think that's where getting comfortable in that realm is where a lot of college athletes, I hope, will continue to further the evolution of where we are in today's society, because that's a space that can truly be appreciated and can truly also be valued because of really the value that it puts on their lives and where they can move forward with. And like you talked about, the progress, it's a lot better than what it was, because there was no mention of physical therapy or mental health whenever I was in college, unless you had like some sort of mental health crisis or you was going through something. But it wasn't nearly put. It was always like, hey, call this hotline. That was like it. If you need help, call this hotline.
No one's going to call the hotline. Right. And we still see that, right? We know that the resources still need to be more embedded, right? Hopefully it shifts as the athletic training world has shifted. So there's not just one, there's multiple, and it becomes the prehab rehab kind of mindset. But I think we have plenty of work to do. I think these conversations help with normalizing and kind of saying, hey, like, we all go through stuff. We all feel stuff. Yeah. Be curious about it, get it before it becomes a problem.
Yeah.
If you were to give a mental cheat code to our listeners like what would be a game changer for you? Like a piece of advice that you're like, I'm going to give this to you and it will elevate your performance.
I think whenever I reflect on that question, I go back to my days whenever I played with the Carolina Panthers, and Ron Rivera was my head coach there. And he talked about 3 things that you can control every single day in every single aspect of your life. And it reflects very closely with what my mom taught me, and that's controlling your inner ape. And ape is acronym for your attitude, your preparation, and your effort. And whenever you look at whatever space, and if we're talking about football, let's dive deep into football and playing running back at the University of Texas. Your attitude as a true freshman, what is it whenever you come in? Are you looking to be the hardest worker whenever you get there? Are you looking to just, hey, say I'm on scholarship and posting on social media, hey, I'm a University of Texas football player? Are you looking to make an impact? Are you looking to play immediately? Are you looking to further elevate where this team is currently and where they will be in the future? Are you looking to protect the identity and the brand of what the Texas football icon and logo stands for, right? So that attitude is going to be key. Whatever you came in for, you got to make sure it aligns with what everybody else is looking for. And the preparation. Being the smartest on the field is one of the best things that I was ever taught. And I talked about Chris Obanaya being my big bro that literally laid out how to do pass pro, how to run routes. He was a former receiver, how to read defenses. That was my big bro. That was my cheat code right there. He told me the ins and outs of the game, how to be able to recognize and then go out there and execute. And then Major Applewhite, former quarterback, was my running back coach. He knew exactly how a defense was going to attack you, and he knew the answers for us to be able to attack them in response to how they lined up. And so being able to be prepared for those moments allowed me to play a lot faster, allowed me to expect, not necessarily react, because I already knew what was going to happen. And I have a game plan or a mental plan in my mind of how I was going to attack that defender or that player, or whenever they line up in this defense or coverage, what I was going to do. I had a plan already. So that preparation key allowed me to be successful in college. And then same way in the NFL. Usually running backs are learning what the running backs do.
Right.
They got to know what the offensive line is doing because they got to pick up blitz protection. And then they also need to know how they're doing run blocking, because you need to know where to run the ball and how to be able to set up your old lineman to be successful. But you don't necessarily need to know what the quarterback's first 4 reads are. You don't need to know what the X receiver is doing on this, and if there's this coverage, why are they running this route, or why the Z receiver needs to be aligned at the top of the numbers for this and that. You don't need to necessarily know that. But from my understanding, it was awesome for me to know that, because it made me more prepared for what the defense was going to do. Because if I know they're in this coverage, then I know where support is coming from. And then I also know that if there's an injury and coach needs somebody to go out there, well, that just gave me another opportunity to touch the field. So I wanted to be the most prepared as possible and the smartest person in the room. And then effort. That's one thing you can control no matter what the circumstances are, no matter what's around you. You can always give 100% of what you got. Even if you're injured, you can give 100% of what you got. And your effort can only be altered whenever you alter it. Nobody else controls that. And that's the whole mindset that my mom gave me, right? If you're going to do something, you go do it 100%. You start it and you finish it. And so that effort speaks closely to me. And so I always take that with me. And how am I controlling my inner ape today?
I love it. That's a great cheat code.
Absolutely.
I've really appreciated it. I mean, I think we covered a lot of the foundation, the humility, the trust, the relationships, the servant side of you that has continued throughout, even now, what you're giving back to the community here, which is amazing. I think the resiliency, the true, honest, difficulties that I'm sure many injured athletes can experience that go through like that. Really great you shared that with us. And obviously the success you've had, right? We didn't even touch on, but competing at a Super Bowl, like that's pretty big.
We didn't touch on it because we didn't win.
I mean, I wasn't going to say anything, but there was a lot of highs in that career, long career, right? 6 years is great for your NFL journey. It's awesome. Any last parting words you want to share with us? Like where people can find out about you, stay in touch, learn about what you're doing?
Yeah, I'm on social media, Fozzy Whit. If you pull up Instagram, Twitter, that's my Instagram handle. That's 2 Z's and 2 T's. If you're looking for a gym, you can find me at the gym as well. And then hopefully, if I'm fortunate enough, you'll see me either on ESPN or hear me on the radio or Sirius XM. Well, thank you for having me on.
Thanks so much. Thank you for joining us this week on the highs and lows of X's and O's. I hope today's episode has equipped you with another mental cheat code to help you navigate your own highs and lows in pursuit of your success. Don't forget to subscribe, share with your friends, and leave us a review wherever you get your podcasts. We'd love to hear your thoughts, and we'd love to hear what you'd like to hear next. Until next time, stay curious, compassionate, and courageous.